All right. On today's episode, we're speaking with Omar Zenhom. He has a company called WebinarNinja, and he's also the host of the 100 MBA Show, which we'll probably bring up on here. But welcome, Omar.
It's good to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into some practical use cases and how somebody can, use some of the processes and some of the things that you've done to grow Webinar Ninja. But maybe just take a minute and talk a little bit about what the product is and just kind of how you got into it.
Sure. So back in, I used to be an educator. I was a high school and university teacher for a while, for 13 years actually. I taught English as a second language, so I was literally in the classroom 5 times a day, 5 days a week. And then while I was in teaching, I was learning about entrepreneurship. I was side hustling. I did that for 10 years, building businesses on the side. And then in 2012, I made that leap into full-time entrepreneurship. I started our community, the $100 MBA, and I started a podcast with the same name, like you mentioned. And I was trying to find a way to be able to promote the podcast and be able to also start bringing in new students and new clients into the $100 MBA program. So I gravitated to webinars because I really love the idea of teaching to hundreds of people at a time, given my background as a teacher. Only issue is I just hated all the webinar software. This is like circa 2013. And, you have to really like Frankenstein, like multiple software to make it all work, like landing page software with a webinar streaming software. Then you have to record it. Then you got to host the recording somewhere. Then you got email marketing software. Then you got time zone conversions. It's like all this stuff. It would take me like 2 hours to put it all together every single week. And I just thought to myself, it's got to be a better way than what I'm doing. It's not very time efficient. So I'm a very amateur PHP, HTML kind of guy, and nowhere near as good as our engineers that we have at WebinarNinja today. But I slapped together a version of the software just to get started to make my life easier, and I started running webinars with it. And then the people that were on the webinar, the attendees, asked me, "What are you using for this webinar? It looks pretty cool." And I just said, "Oh, it's just something I slapped together." And then they asked the question, can we buy it? And I was just like, oh, I never thought about selling what I just put together. So I've had a few failures in the past where I thought, oh, this is a brilliant idea. And I launched something and then crickets, right? No one would buy. So I wanted to validate to make sure people actually wanted this thing before I started building out the software to make it available for commercial use, and not just something I slapped together where I know kind of the gremlins. So I pre-sold it. I actually put together a one-page landing page. I pre-sold WebinarNinja to to beta users to see if they are interested. They would have to put down $250 as a deposit, and I basically just outlined what problems I solve with the software. And through that, we launched, and in 48 hours, we sold out our 250 spots. So in that moment, I realized, okay, this is actually a big pain point that people have. I should pursue this. And it gave us a bit of funding so that we can hire a real engineer to clean up the software and start selling it. So basically, we wanted to create a solution that was built for creators and coaches, for people to be able to focus on their content and focus on their presentation and not really on the software and the tech side of things. They just want to be able to focus on their presentation and let everything else kind of take care of itself. The recording, the scheduling, the emails, all that kind of stuff. So that's really the genesis of the idea of WebinarNinja, which is like simplify the complicated.
Yeah, I do remember trying to like host online anything back in the day. And yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, everything was segmented and detached. I don't even think back then Zapier was really as big of a thing. And so it was like, you really had to like, if it was natively integrated, you could win. If it wasn't, it was like, hope for the best, send a webhook. I mean, it was messy.
Very,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So I'll link up the URL to that in the show notes. But I think what would be the most valuable is to kind of go through There's a lot to unpack there in that, came from the education side. I think having that perspective of a teacher creates a very unique perspective on like what a product like this should have. I think it's particularly from like an engagement standpoint, from an interaction standpoint, from a how do you bring together things that allow people to learn if they've got different learning styles. So, that's a really cool perspective. But you coded MVP yourself?
Yeah, it was very. I mean, MVP was just something I used,
Yeah.
but once we were going to hand it over to somebody else, we got an engineer to do it. We hired a freelancer.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And so, just the fact that you've taught, is it you're self-taught in code and then you built it?
Self-taught. I just
Yeah,
learned
that's
from
great.
books. Actually, not even courses online. I learned from books from the library. Actually, my first dive into HTML and CSS was in university, and uh, I couldn't afford to buy books. I was a poor student, so I would go to Barnes and Nobles and just spend 2 hours there until I got tired and then left.
Love it, love it. Okay, so you put it together. You're bringing in people to what was the community? Was it kind of a group coaching? I know I've seen the podcast, but I don't know if I've seen that much about the community.
Yeah, so the $100 MBA is basically an online course that teaches people the fundamentals so they can feel like they have the prerequisite information or knowledge to be able to start a business. One of the things I realize is that a lot of people feel like, oh, I got to get an MBA so I could be a credible entrepreneur. I don't know anything about marketing or sales or finance or P&L or any of that kind of stuff. And what I realize is that like you really don't need to know much to just get started. Most of what you're going to learn by doing. And to be quite honest, I've been doing this for a very long time. Um, it's actually very bad advice to give somebody like this is how you build every business. No, every business is different. What worked for me most likely will not work for you. So because of my product, because of my audience, because of who I am, my strengths, my areas of expertise. So it's I wanted to just give them the fundamentals where they can be like, okay, I know exactly how to kind of get started, and then earn their skills in the real world.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I 100% agree with that. I mean, I've had people approach me a few times about, producing online courses about different things, and I've never felt great because it's like for me it's like trying to cover such a wide berth of topics, but I think the way that you approached it feels very like very honest, very like simple, very like completely legitimate compared to a lot of the ways that people are doing courses these days, which is really like it's a one size fit all exercise, and so many people drop off and don't fit into that bucket like so quickly in the
Yes.
process. So yeah, it's frustrating to see that ecosystem of learning.
Yeah, and that translates to Webinar Ninja as well because um, one of the reasons why our users were attracted to us is because any other solution was very marketing and markety focused, and it was heavily like focusing on like how do you make the most sales and conversions and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people don't really resonate with that. They're just like, that's great and all, but I want to be able to have a tool that allows me to interact with my audience and be able to set polls or be able to bring them on camera at any time and that kind of stuff. And that is not primarily sales focused. It's more about teaching and learning and being able to build trust with your audience. So we knew that like that part of the market is covered. Like there's so many marketing tools out there and there's so many people that like are internet marketers, and that was not our vibe anyway. So we just said, this is going to be our focus.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. All right, perfect. So I'd love to jump into a couple of the practical pieces of it here. So, self-taught, built MVP, which was just for yourself. And so that
Mm-hmm.
that made a lot of sense. So, on the topic of bootstrap, because I think a lot of people that are listening, are in the marketing space, and we often find, and I've seen it time and time again, we find products that do like 75% of what we're hoping for, and we get to the part where there's like some gap, and we're like, well, maybe I could just patch this or like change this setting or do this. And you're like, oh no, it actually breaks the ability for me to use it. And I think that's why so many different softwares pop up nowadays, because it's like, I have this specific use case. Everyone's trying to build this all in one, but like, certain things need to be built when you operate in a certain way. And so I think I know some people who own agencies who have built their own internal SaaS products to just improve their own business and service, whether it's a customized CRM, whether it's outreach
Mm-hmm.
software, different things like that. And so how did you go about like strategically bootstrapping? So I know you did the pre-sale. Like, how did you ramp that up? How did you get awareness to it? I know you said you built the landing page. What was like the traffic from that? How did that all come together?
Yeah. So this is a very common question I ask. Like, how did you get your first 250 beta users? How did you market it? So honestly, it's just a lot of grit. I went to a lot of conferences at the time. One of the conferences that stand out was the New Media Expos in Vegas. It was like a blogging conference. And anybody I met, I just basically took down their contact, their email or their Twitter handle or something, and just became friends with them, had a drink or a meal with them, got to know like as many people I knew that I really admired and knew online. Um, at the time I launched Webinar Ninja, our email list was like less than 500 people. So it wasn't like we had a huge email list at the time. So what I did is I just reached out to every single person personally on my Gmail account that I met along the way at conferences, in meetups, in if maybe I was on a podcast or we were in a mastermind together at one time or whatever. And I just said, hey, I'm launching this new thing. It's called this Webinar Ninja, and this is the solution. This is what we do. If you think this would be helpful to your audience, would you mind sharing it? And I would offer like some copy for email or Twitter or whatever they're using. And for me, it would be like I felt they would be a lot more beneficial to us if they shared it versus buying it. Like if they bought it, I just get one user. I actually want them to share it because their following, their listeners, their email subscribers, they will do what they say. So if they recommend something, if they think, hey, check this out, that'd be amazing. And that really helped us a lot because I actually timed it so that I sent these emails all in one day to each person. And the reason why we want to do this is because momentum is very powerful, especially in online marketing, because I wanted us to sound or feel like we're everywhere in one time. Oh, because as you know, you're sometimes on multiple email lists of different creators and different entrepreneurs, and you're like, oh, everybody's talking about this new thing. I should check it out. It creates a sense of like, I need to see what this is all about. So that was really how we got our first beta members. But be honest with you, like my advice to anybody getting started to make their life easier in the beginning, in the middle, 8 years later, or whatever it is like the stronger the pain that you're solving, the better your chances are of success. The better you are to get like traction. Like even if it's a very specific problem, like you mentioned, like there are a lot of tools out there that just solve one specific problem. That's fine. But as long as like there's a major pain, they're like, man, can't stand this thing. I wish there was a solution. This sounds amazing, right? And don't worry too much about price point or all that kind of stuff. But if it's a strong enough pain, it's going to solve a lot of your problems. I find the biggest mistake that people have is that they try to solve pains that are kind of like lukewarm. Like there's like, yeah, okay, but like the solution I'm using now, the workaround, it's fine. Like I'm not dealing with it. My VA deals with it, so I'm not really exposed to that pain. So like you really need to be careful of the problem you're trying to solve and make sure that it's a big enough problem.
Yeah. And did you, beyond just using yourself as an initial use case, did you speak to other people before kind of like get going from MVP version to like the build out? Did you have any like potential customer interviews? Did you go through an iterative process like that? Or was it just like, I'm just solving a problem for me. I feel it's big enough and we're good to go?
So the steps were basically I created the solution for me with no intention of making this a product. I started using it. People said, "Hey, can we buy this thing? Is this something that's for sale?" That was kind of a little bit of validation, but I was like, "Oh, I need people to put their money where their mouth is." So I spent literally a weekend to create a landing page to validate this idea and see if people are willing to put money down to and if I didn't get validation, like 5 people signed up, I would have just refunded them and said, "Hey, we're not going to go ahead with this project. There's not enough interest," and that's fine. I've done that before, so I was used to it. So after that, that was validation just on the promise of the solution of a problem. They're willing to pay money for that. Like imagine, people. A lot of people don't even want to pay money for booking a hotel. Like so, let alone a software that they never saw before. I've never created a software before, but they're just like, this is a big enough pain. Once we got that cash, we're like, okay, we got to go ahead and do this and deliver. We communicated these people, say, okay, we're going to do this very similar to a Kickstarter, and just say like, hey, we're going to do this project. This is the timeline. One of the things that we did is that those beta members, those 250 beta members, we gave them lifetime access to the software. And I just saw them as investors. I just saw them as like, hey, these guys are investors. I want them to invest in the product so that they can feel like obliged to give me feedback. I feel like, hey, I'm going to have this thing for the rest of my life. I want to be a user. I want to be able to influence it in some way. So I made it very clear that, as we launch, there will be problems. There will be things that are not perfect. There are going to be things that you wish that were better. That's your job to voice that to me. And we made it very streamlined communication. We got on calls, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, that first 6 months of being in beta and people using it really informed our product. Nicole, my co-founder, and I, we know those people by name, those 250 people. Like if I saw them in a conference, I know them, right? So those people really helped us big time shape what Webinar Ninja is today and then reiterate over and over and over.
Yeah, love that. And so as this is being built out, you're getting a feedback loop. How much did the product change from like initial thesis to like we're now happy with it based on like what you originally thought, but then like the feedback loop and the testing, like was it a dramatic shift? Was it dramatically different or just, like 10% different? Like I'm just curious about the iteration there.
Yeah, I would say somewhere between dramatic and not dramatic. Like there is a big difference. Like there's a big difference of the way the product functions. One of the things we realize is most people don't want to have so many options. They like the thing is that you can't cater for everybody. You were talking about like, being niche. You can't cater for everybody. So what we realize that most of the people that we're serving, they want something that's easy to create and easy to use. You can't have that and have endless customization. That causes confusion, right? If they this is like ConvertKit, which is very easy to use, versus like a HubSpot or a Salesforce. Like the reason why Salesforce is so complicated is because those clients need that kind of optimization, that kind of customization for their business, and they'll even like change the software for them, particularly for that business. So we were not that. And we realized very quickly is that like we were thinking by adding features we were helping them, but actually we were hurting them. We're actually saying we're making it too confusing. We're making it too hard to use because it's hard to add things without adding complexity. So one of the things that we do till today is if we're going to add a feature, add functionality, how do we do this without making it hard to use? And at the same time, how do we do this so that it's actually saving them time and saving them effort and saving them, like, for example, one of the features that we came up with like early on, maybe after year 2, was a lot of people hated having to rewrite their emails for their email notifications, the reminders they get, because every time they ran a webinar, they had to go and copy and paste and things like that. And this was just the standard. Everybody did this. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? So we added a feature, which is basically was a toggle to say save as default. So then when they save as default, the next time they create a webinar, the copy would be there and we'd have the variables like the webinar date and time to populate automatically. So they actually never would have to go and change their email notifications ever again. So that's adding a feature by saving them time and effort. But some people add features so this like, oh, now they have to customize this part of the page. Now they have to do this because it's there. So that's our philosophy. It depends on your users, depends on your audience. My audience, they just want to get in, get out, get it done.
Yeah. Awesome. So we get, build out the product, you've got your initial test users, but you have a bit of a problem in that they're lifetime owners of this thing. And now you need more people. So short question then kind of next piece is, were you able to build the entire thing out on the original round that of pre-sale? Were you able to build it out with those funds or did you require more funds?
So we dipped in a lot of our own personal capital to be able to go past that first round. So that first round funded maybe the first year or so, but we had to build out our infrastructure, our security, our team, all that kind of stuff. So I and Nicole and I invested our own money to kind of, because we saw now we have legs and has potential. And then we started, I think, about 9 months in, we started to sell, monthly and annual memberships, and became like a full-on SaaS. And it wasn't super hard to kind of transition into that because it was a closed beta. Not everybody knew about the 250 and things like that. But then, our price point was quite competitive. It was good. We were just trying to get more users to get more feedback at the time, get some traction. Yeah. So when we moved to monthly and annual, then we started to get some cash flow from that. But the name of the game in SaaS is actually not growth; is actually retention. Like you want to keep your customers happy as much as possible. Lock them into annuals deals as much as possible, because uh, you need them to use the software so that because there's a viral marketing sense to it, but also you need them to be able to get value from the software so they can continue to renew.
Got it. Yeah. And so, how did you start getting that next line of customers? Was it paid ads? Was it kind of dipping into the channel partners situation? Like, how did you kind of go to the next phase?
So I have a podcast called the $100 MBA Show. We've been fortunate enough to have a pretty successful podcast. We've had over 200 million downloads over the last 8 years. We get about 125,000 daily listeners. So that show kind of grew as we were growing Webinar Ninja, and it allowed me to share some of the lessons I've learned along the way building a SaaS company. So that kind of helped promote Webinar Ninja a little bit and people to be curious and to check it out and things like that. We do a lot of content marketing. Like we're students of Wistia, who are a great company that promote content marketing. They're a video hosting platform, and we we just really went one all in on great articles, great videos, doing lots of webinars for our members and for our non-members, and just really focused on just adding as much value as possible to the marketplace. And that has helped us till today with our SEO. SEO is the number one traffic provider for us because we started in 2014, and that stuff kind of builds and gains momentum. And the interesting is that when you have quality content, it doesn't matter how many updates in Google, it's always in your favor. You're always actually getting better in your ranking because you're not trying to buy backlinks or do exchanges or any of that kind of stuff. So SEO really helped us a lot because we come from a content world with the $100 MBA, with my teaching background. So we just doubled down on that and said that, hey, this is kind of evergreen. This is kind of what we're going to do. We definitely spent money on some paid marketing and ads and Facebook, Google, all that kind of stuff back when it was a lot more affordable. That helped us a bit as well. And then also just word of mouth marketing and referral marketing. We would actually ask our users on webinars, or we had member webinars every single month. This is what we do even till today. But basically, we just would ask them, hey, if you're enjoying your experience, do you mind tweeting about it? Do you mind sharing it on social? Do you mind telling your person right next to you, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget to ask, and they're happy to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think referral for a lot of people is such an untapped channel, especially if you're good at what you do or you've thoughtfully crafted a product that like really serves a niche. And I think I see it time and time again with even just customers that we run marketing for. Yes, this paid channel is functional. Yes, it's profitable, but if you've got hundreds or thousands of customers, like, and then you do a great job, like where's the extra contribution from them? You're not going to get everybody, certainly, but if you can find a couple key people that really like to talk well about you, I mean, that's such a channel that it can be
Totally.
untapped. Yeah. So going back kind of into the beginning of that journey till now, so like I think there's some really good takeaways about how like to mentally kind of structure this for people. What are one or two things that you wish you knew when you started, or that you did at the beginning that you wish you could like take over or do over again?
It's tough because I do believe the struggles and the challenges that we experience in life shape who we are. And it's actually the path to becoming better and having a better life. So big, and it allows you to endure challenges that you have in the future. But having said that, I think one of the things that I could have done better, or I've learned some hard lessons, and I would recommend other people to think about is hiring. When you're hiring somebody, this is a big decision. When you hire somebody, like it's not something that's like, hey, we'll just check it out, we'll figure out, see, we vibe together. No, when you have somebody join your team, they have an incredible amount of impact. Doesn't matter what position, incredible amount of impact on your business, on your brand. It could be a customer service hire. It could be a designer. It could be an engineer. It could be a manager. It doesn't matter. This person represents you, your credibility, your brand. So and they can hurt your brain unintentionally. They can actually try to do a good job, but maybe they just don't have the skills, or they are unaware of what they're doing is going to hurt the company. So you need to be very careful about who you hire. I'm a big believer in hiring slowly, and if it's not a good fit, then letting go as quickly as possible. Uh, Over time, you'll start to feel very quickly, this person's not a good fit. This is not working out. And every time I felt that in my team, um, I don't, yeah, every time. I can't even think of an exception, but every time I was right. And the only difference is that I waited too long. Like, I waited too long, and it's not good for them to stick around in something that's not fulfilling. It's not good for them to be part of something that they feel like they're failing at. So it's very important for you to recognize that the people that you bring on your team have a great impact on your business. So make sure you're making the right call. Make sure that, and you can't know for sure 100%. And this is why we implement these 3 months. We call it like a 3 months grace period, where basically both parties can leave at any time in those 3 months. And in 3 months, you should have enough data to be like, this person is somebody I can really invest in, or this is not exactly what we need.
Yeah. And it's funny, sometimes it's not even necessarily the skill set match. It's like, it's such just like a vibe or a personality match where
Attitude,
like
yeah.
100%. Yeah. Like I've worked with and had failure with like highly skilled people that I just didn't want to be around.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a good indication after the interview. Do you want to have a meal with them afterwards? Would you want to hang out with them afterwards? If not, then there's a good chance that no one else on your team is going to want to. So, like, you spend most of your wakeful hours with these people. Why are you making it hell on yourself just because they're have a certification, or they have great experience, or they worked at Google? No, that's not worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, we packed a lot of value and stuff into this one. Is there, just as a final thought, is there anything that I did not ask you that I should have asked you?
I'm not sure. The one thing I would say is that, like, the one constant that I had in my entrepreneurial career that I think that has helped me the most, and I think really doesn't get talked about enough, is I've gotten a tremendous amount of value by having a great habit of reading books. There's so much value you can get from books. Like, I haven't read a book, even a horrible book, that wasn't worth the read in terms of learning one thing, one takeaway, one perspective. And some books, it's every page there's a learning, there's something that you're gonna change your mind on. But just having the habit of reading every day, and it's not like you have to read tons. I only read about 30 minutes a day, and I listen to audiobooks when I'm at the gym. But just having that consistent habit just allows you to become who you need to be to achieve the goals you want. And it's just not going to happen by accident. You have to input information that is going to allow you to change, and things change when you change. So that's my biggest takeaway over the last 20 years of building businesses, is that constant has helped me big time.
Awesome. Best or most impactful book you've read in the last 6 months?
Oof. Surprisingly, I would say Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. It's not a business book, but it's a life lesson book that you can translate to any situation. Um, I was really surprised by that book. Really, really great read, and great on Audible because Matthew McConaughey does the narration, and who doesn't love Matthew McConaughey?
Beautiful. Yeah, I've got about 5 or 6 credits floating around mine, so
There
I'm
you
gonna
go.
go.
Got to
I'll go
grab it.
download that. Awesome. Listen, man, thank you so much for your time. I will link up the websites in the websites in the podcast in the show notes. But is there somewhere that is best if someone wants to reach out or follow you or keep up with your content?
Yeah, I'm not a huge social guy, but where I do live the most is Twitter. So at the Omar Zenhom, you can follow me. My DMs are open. Happy to answer questions or help you out.
Love it. All right, man. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.